School, you either love it or you hate it. No, that's a lie. Everybody hates it. Well, let me tell you about my school days. I took a lot of subjects. Physics, English, calculus, nerd! But the subject that stuck with me the most was chemistry. Because of this man, my chemistry teacher. Let's call him, Mr. White.
Yo, Mr. White, I can't even pronounce half this shit.
Now, a little about me as a student. I like to think I was a pretty good kid. I got good grades, I always did my homework, I paid attention. Well, most of the time. But no matter what I did, it was never enough for Mr. White. I met Mr. White for the first time in year 12. And right off the bat, everything that could go wrong, went wrong. For those of you with older siblings who went to the same school, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The worst feeling ever is when you end up with your sibling's old teacher. Like, just imagine your first day at school and the teacher's taking the roll, sees your last name, and in front of the whole class goes, "Oh, you wouldn't happen to be Jessica's brother now, would you?" And then you just sit there awkwardly nodding your head. To give a little backstory on my family, my mom had 2 kids, my sister and then me. My sister was basically the golden child. She aced every class, got into college, and ended up becoming a dentist. So it's safe to say that I'm the disappointment of the family. So that's exactly what happens. Mr. White recognizes my name and connects it to my perfect goody 2-shoes A+ student sister. And guess what? He expected me to be just like her. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. Now, I had these 2 friends I would always sit with in class. And let's just say, Mr. White did not like us. In fact, Mr. White was really good at something called playing favorites. There was this group of girls who would sit in the front of the class, ready exactly on time, all their stationery in a neat formation, ready to seize the day. You know the type of students that would remind the teacher to set us homework for the weekend? Every teacher's dream students. And then there was us. Now, usually, it's nice to have a goody 2-shoes in the class, because that means whenever the teacher asks a question, they're always the ones answering. But Mr. White, he was different. He had unconventional ways of teaching. So on our very first day of chemistry, Mr. White walked around the class and handed everyone popsicle sticks. And on these popsicle sticks, we had to write our names and hand them back to him. He then put these popsicle sticks in a jar, and anytime during class when he asked a question, instead of picking someone with their hand up, like a normal teacher does, he instead cheekily picked out a popsicle stick and read their name out to answer the question. So you were essentially forced to pay attention in class because you just never knew when Mr. White was going to call out your name. So who can tell me what an ionic compound is? Please don't be me, please don't be me. Can I pass? So one time in class, I guess I had enough of learning about molecules and their polarities and blah blah. So naturally, I started drawing in my book to kill time. Harmless, right? Wrong. It was all going fine until I suddenly realized the whole class went deathly quiet. That's when I felt someone breathing down my neck. So I look up to see my friends staring at me with fear in their eyes. Slowly I turn around and there he was, Mr. White, towering over me, glasses halfway down his nose, eyebrows scrunched tightly, breathing heavily. He snatches up my book and holds it up for the whole class to see. Wow! Looks like we've got a real Picasso in our class. And remember, kids, don't waste your time drawing, because being an artist doesn't pay the bills. Wow, Mr. White, that hurt. I mean, I guess he wasn't wrong, but that's besides the point. One thing everyone in school knew was that Mr. White was a die-hard Star Wars nerd. I'm talking, he would rock up in a Chewbacca onesie every May 4th, which is a bummer for me, because I had never seen Star Wars in my life. As if he needed another reason to hate me. So while he was teaching, he would always drop these references to Star Wars, and the whole class would be laughing at his jokes, except me. And the only thing more unstable than a reactive molecule is Anakin Skywalker. Face it when you are. Mr. White also had this weird obsession with telling dad jokes, and honestly, I never had a dad growing up, but in some twisted way, Mr. White made up for all the dad jokes I missed in my childhood. Why don't chemists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Sometimes I'd feel bad for him when no one laughed at his jokes, so I'd let out a little pity chuckle to support him, but that didn't earn me any extra brownie points. He also had this crazy obsession with reenacting historic events with his figurines. We used to call them toys, but he would always correct us with that serious tone of his. They're not toys, they're figurines. Every kid has gone through at least one traumatic experience in life. For some, it's losing their phone, and for some, it's getting caught cheating on a test. But for me, it was getting yelled at by Mr. White. And when I say yelled at, I mean yelled at. See, it was just a normal chemistry lesson like any other day, except I think Mr. White woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. I guess you could say the force was not with him that day. See, Mr. White, I can make Star Wars references too. So my friend and I are over here having a conversation about our chemistry homework, and then out of nowhere, Mr. White slams his ruler down, turns towards my friend and I, and yells at us in front of the whole class. I'm talking full volume, vein popping in his forehead, smoke coming out of his ears. He starts unloading on us about everything. How we're terrible students, how we're always late, how we always interrupt his lessons. Now my friend and I are both dark-skinned individuals, but I swear, that was the first time I ever saw us turn red from embarrassment. I could feel the whole class staring a hole through the back of my head. And the worst part was the goody two-shoes girls at the back giggling. Might I add, they were talking to Mr. White. But of course, that didn't matter because they were his little teacher's pets. But as much as I wanted to hate him, I couldn't. The guy knew his stuff. Despite his personality being, well, let's just say unique. When he taught, you listened. Even the subjects I hated, like organic chemistry, it all started making sense after a while. The dude was like a real-life Walter White. Except instead of dealing with crystal meth, he would play with Star Wars figurines in his basement. Pew pew pew! Any last words, Darth Vader?
Luke, I am your father.
And the weird thing is, I think he knew that we were all a little scared of him. But it was that fear that made us respect him. And maybe, just maybe, that's how he got us all to actually learn something in his class. Mr. White wasn't all that bad. As much as he hated me, he was probably one of the best teachers I've ever had. I ended up passing his class with straight A's, and honestly, I can't help but give him credit for that. So despite his deep, deep, deep hatred in his heart for me, I'm still grateful that I can now calculate the molar mass of any compound in chemistry, because that's obviously a very helpful skill to have in life. So that was Mr. White, the teacher who hated me, but also made me a better student. And hey, if you're watching this, Mr. White, I still haven't watched Star Wars.